Right, where are we next? Virus issues is our next topic. And the World Horror Organization, said to be for our health, and their special envoy on COVID-19 has urged world leaders this week to stop using lockdowns as your primary control method, and said we in the World Horror Organization do not advocate lockdowns as the primary means of control of this virus, according to Dr. David Nabarro, who spoke to The Spectator's Andrew Neil this week. And he said the only time we believe a lockdown is justified is to buy you time to reorganize, regroup, rebalance your resources, protect your health workers who are exhausted. Funny that, because all the hospitals are empty. But by and large, we would rather not do it. Now, Nabarro went on to point out several of the negative consequences lockdowns have caused across the world, including devastating tourism industries and increased hunger and poverty. He said, just look at what's happened to the tourism industry in the Caribbean, for example, or in the Pacific, because people aren't taking their holidays, he said. Look what's happened to the smallholder farmers all over the world. Look what's happening to the poverty levels. It seems that we may well have a doubling of world poverty by next year, and we may well have at least a doubling of child malnutrition. Now, earlier this week, thousands of medical health experts signed their names to a petition calling for an end of the coronavirus lockdowns, citing the irreparable damage they've caused. And infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists, we have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health impacts of the prevailing COVID-19 policies, and recommend an approach we call focused protection. Oh my, some common sense from the World Horror Organization. You best be careful or Facebook will close down your page as well. This next report is often overlooked, and so I thought I would add it in its entirety, and the impact on children this fake virus has created. And in an article recently where a mum of a nearly 5-year-old daughter wrote in to express concern that her child hasn't seen any friends in 5 months since the lockdowns began. And she said, because of COVID, my husband and I have decided to skip pre-K altogether and teach her everything she needs to know before kindergarten ourselves, which is probably the best anyway. And she said, this doesn't worry me academically, but I'm concerned about her development and the loss of social interaction she was going to experience. And the advice columnist responded that the mum shouldn't worry about her child's social isolation, saying she is part of a whole generation of quarantined 5-year-olds. Well, she go to take the same degree as Alan of Circle of White Light. What an overlook that is. It will take her a while to catch up once she re-enters society, sure, but it's going to take everyone a while. Really. Such crass and cold-hearted statements, them. This resignation to ongoing government lockdowns, endless social distancing, mandatory mask orders and travel restrictions, even as the virus wanes in the US, is damaging to our social and economic health, and may be particularly problematic for the children who are separated from their peers. Now, there is some evidence that suggests that young people are faring well outside of forced schooling. I'm not surprised that they're going to learn something. with less school-induced stress and anxiety. And the same research indicates that children and teens are missing their friends daily, and social isolation seems to be taking a toll. Now, with most large urban school districts planning remote learning only this fall, the isolation is likely to continue for many children unless parents step in to alleviate this loneliness. Now, an article in the Wall Street Journal exposed the impact of pandemic-related social isolation on children and adolescents. Of all age groups, this virus is probably more socially devastating to teens than any other group. They are bored and they are lonely, according to Joseph P. Allen, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Virginia. And another recent journal article reinforced these unintended consequences, and don't believe that for 1 minute. They were intended consequences. People were coming together and the frequency was going up, so they separated them and the frequency went down. This is what this whole thing is about. And the consequences of the lockdowns and social distancing on adolescents, and particularly girls. Adolescent girls already were experiencing record high levels of loneliness, anxiety and depression before the pandemic, according to Mary Pfeiffer, a clinical psychologist and author of Reviving Ophelia, Saving the Selves of Adolescent Girls, and said all of the things that a year ago were increasing girls' depression have been exacerbated by the pandemic, according to Dr. Pfeiffer. And she said kids need other kids, regardless of whether or not you think schools should reopen for in-person learning this fall. The reality is that kids need to be around other kids to play, socialise and learn. They don't need this play, socialising and learning to happen in schools. In fact, they may find much more authentic, satisfying social play and learning outside of a conventional classroom. In some ways, yeah. And Peter Gray, research professor of psychology at Boston College, has written extensively on the importance of unstructured childhood social play for children's health and their well-being. And in a June interview, Gray said, "Play is crucial to children's development, and much of my research shows that over the last few decades our children have been very play deprived." Absolutely. And they spend so much time in school, so much time on homework after school, so much time in adult-directed activities which are not fully play. Play is activity that children develop themselves, that children take control of themselves, and their children learn to be independent and solve their own problems. Absolutely. You got to remember, 100 or so years ago, the children left school at 13 and were 1,000 times more intelligent than our current children. Now it's 18. What are they learning in the extra 5 years? Well, clearly nothing. Gray went on, if they are play deprived prior to the pandemic, then many children may be more play deprived now, as they have been cut off from peers for now nearly 6 months. And he documented the correlation between the decline in play and the rise in childhood and adolescent mental health disorders. And this is something that is deeply concerning now, as children, and especially adolescents, are even more distanced from their peers. And it says, whilst technology has been a lifesaver for all of us during the pandemic, it has also consumed a much larger portion of children's lives. And a new report released this month by the Children's Hospital of Chicago found that 63% of teens are using social media more than they did pre-pandemic, and more than half of their parents indicate that social media use is having a negative impact on their kids. But perhaps more startling, the survey found that 68% of parents say that social media is interfering with their teens' ability to have normal social interactions. That's because of the programming in it, particularly Facebook. And concerns about social media use and its impact on teen mental and social health were widespread before the pandemic, but it could be particularly troubling now as social media use soars while many teens remain separated from their friends. It's a big problem. I don't think they're losing out academically at all, because school has proven to teach absolute zero. I had a discussion about this recently, how people can't add up without a machine, don't understand basic math, can't spell properly, can't read properly, don't use phonetics, can't pronounce words properly either. And they're your basics in life. If you can't add up or do basic math, read or write properly, you're going to struggle the rest of your life. So the schools shut down. Personally, I would shut them all down. But we need to have a replacement and come up with a proper curriculum that's going to expand and be of interest for child development, not child bots, where we teach them manners again, as that's been lost recently. Respect for others, which then brings in the racism and the sexism and all the other rubbish. Caring and sharing, need not greed. It's all like the cooperative model, where people learn to cooperate and play together without doing harm to each other, competing against each other unnecessarily. We can teach how to meditate, better reforms of people who misbehave than giving them a whack. But somewhere along the line we have to fix this education problem and turn it into a teaching program that's going to be healthy for all children. It's a massive problem in this country. Massive, far more than people realise. And hopefully some good things will come out of this. But the competing with each other in classrooms is not good either. So there is some benefits to the shutdown. And maybe when they all come back together, they will all care for each other, not more, and not compete. Still on the virus, a British study has found 86% of people infected with the virus didn't show the main symptoms on the day that they were actually tested. Oops. And researchers at University College London looked at data from a survey that has been testing thousands of UK households every week, regardless of whether the subjects had symptoms. And the study that was released on Thursday looked at data for 36,061 people between April and June, and researchers found among those who tested positive, 86% didn't have a cough, fever, or loss of taste or smell. Oops. That's almost the same figure as the 90% false positive, is it not? And the lead researcher, Irene Peterson, said that while people may have had symptoms in the days before the test or developed them later, the study suggests that many may be spreading the virus while asymptomatic. And she says frequent and widespread testing of all individuals is needed to curb the silent transmission. No, it's not, because the problem is the test. Lead researcher, my ass. This is from a section out of what Q posted this week, which is fairly interesting. And so what it stated was the total American deaths, all causes, for the last 3 years. Now, in 2017, the total deaths was 2.813 million, or 234,000 a month. In 2018, the total deaths were 2.839, or 237,000 a month. In 2019, 2.855 million, or 238,000 a month. 2020, January up until the week ending 9/26, 2.13 million, which is 236,000 a month, which is 2,000 a month more than 2017, 1,000 less than 2018, and 2,000 less per month than 2019. So the projected figures would be 236,000, 2.838 million, which is less than 2018 and 2019. And then Q said, why did the Democratic governors push C19 infected patients into nursing homes? I'm glad they're finally covering what we exposed many, many months ago. And what are the percentages of total C19 deaths attributed to nursing homes? Who is most susceptible? And the same Democratic governors who pushed C19 infected patients into nursing homes attempting to keep state or states closed. Why? Asked Q. And that is fine, Q, but what are you doing about it? Pain is coming, you said, and you were right. But was it for the people, not the clowns? And what everyone is asking Q is, where are